Good morning. It's 10 a.m. on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, and this is 10 on Tuesdays. Today we're discussing my favorite topic, the construction industry, and our guest today is Michael Griffin, who is the CFO of JP Cullen. I'm Holly Hoffman, founding partner and CEO of the Sales and Income Tax Advisory Network. Prior to creating my company, I worked for the Wisconsin Department of Revenue as an auditor, speaker, and sales tax specialist. My passion is to help provide sales tax education and support to tax professionals, businesses, and associations with the goal of building a network of empowered taxpayers. For more information, visit salesandincometax.com. Thank you for joining my web chats 10 on Tuesdays. Every Tuesday from 10 to 10:30 a.m. You can check out previous episodes on my 10 on Tuesdays channel. To find my channel, go to salesandincometax.com, look for the 10 on Tuesdays logo, click the logo if you want to register for the weekly webinars, or click on watch previous episodes to access the 10 on Tuesdays channel. Now, let me formally introduce my guest today, Michael Griffin of JP Cullen. Michael is the CFO of JP Cullen. You've been with JP Cullen just over 3 years now. And I just want to give a little background if people are not familiar with JP Cullen. They are a fifth generation family owned business. They've been in business since 1892. They're headquartered in Janesville, Wisconsin, and they serve Wisconsin, Northeast Iowa, and Northern Illinois. And they do very large projects, very tough jobs. And Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Holly. Happy to be here.
Great. How I just asked you before we came on, I didn't realize you had only been with JP Cullen for just over 3 years, which is a long time, but for learning tax law and the ins and outs of the construction industry, it's a very tough, complicated area. And I was asking you how you liked it. Why don't you give a little background about yourself and how you like your position and
Sure,
what you have to deal with?
sure. So as you said, I've been with Cullen about 3 years. I'm really enjoying it. There's a lot to the construction industry. Previously, I had worked for a CPA firm in the Chicago area, but serviced a number of national contractors, so had gotten to know the construction industry from a CPA standpoint in public accounting, primarily in auditing. But that made the transition a little easier because I'd known the industry a little bit. But I will say there was a lot to pick up. Fortunately, our CFO that retired is still helping us out, so he's nice to be able to bounce a question or two off here or there. And Holly, I know when it comes to sales tax, I lean on you sometimes for questions too, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very much enjoying it, and we just had a succession of our fifth generation into the company president here this year, which has been fun and tough at the same time because we lost our president to leukemia previously, but it's still exciting for us to have George and Jeannie taking the reins.
Awesome. And that's what I like. I feel like the construction industry in general tends to be more family oriented. The businesses start out small family operations. I know I serve a lot of the smaller contractors, but even like JP Cullen is Wisconsin is a small community, I feel like, and I feel like I know a lot of people. Well, I'm connected to your area, the Janesville, Beloit areas where my husband's from, and we have family down there and friends down there. So we have friends that work for JP Cullen too. Great place to work for, very family oriented. And I feel like the companies in Janesville, Beloit area really give back to the community and are very community involved, very small town oriented.
Yeah, it's a very tight crew and very proud of the heritage from Janesville. And I think with the GM plant and how that was historically, a big event and happened in Janesville, I think a lot of people rallied around the area and really have a lot of pride in the area. So it's been fun. I obviously relocated when I moved here from Chicago, and I do live up near Madison, but getting to know the Janesville area and Madison area has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, Great. Awesome. So today we're talking about the construction industry, kind of the changes with COVID and the pandemic, and how that's impacting things. I have future guests coming up to talk about this also, but I kind of wanted to get your perspective from a larger contractor um, as to how it's impacted. So you do more public and private large jobs. You want to talk a little bit about the difference in the impact between public investment and private investment as a result of the pandemic?
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, construction is an industry that tends to kind of trail the overall economy because people start their projects and they last a little while. So we did see all projects kind of hit a little bit of a pause back earlier this year, but what we've seen as kind of the pandemic has played out here over the last 8 months is the public spaces continued to invest and continue to put out projects. We do see the private client pace, pushing pause a little bit. I think there's some uncertainty in where they would like to invest and what they would need as far as a design. When people return to work or how their commercial space needs to be looked at, or potentially an entertainment space. People have put all those kind of plans on pause to try and see what they need to design things to be so that when we can have larger groups in person again, they can have those spaces. But really, the big picture is it's kind of a split. The public is spending money. We see a lot in residential, even though we are not residential contractors. We do see a lot of investment in residential, people modernizing their homes. And then commercially, we do see some private clients and even office spaces trying to modernize a little bit of their existing buildings. And that could be a remodel of the space to where they're not as open and a little bit more private offices rather than like a cube or an open
Mhm.
space. I think there'd been a big movement in the industry in offices to do open space offices, and we're seeing it kind of change a little bit. And we're also seeing people trying to modernize kind of their air filtration as well. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, it's we were kind of talking about this yesterday, and the shift just before the pandemic, everything was moving towards spaces that please millennials and open and being able to switch shared office space between different companies, and you pick your desk each day versus now moving back towards um, assigned office spaces, separate,
yeah,
sectioned off office space. It's
definitely.
interesting. And one of the things that we talked about, you talk about the lagging, but also you talked a little bit to me about the architects and designers. Has their work picked up? How does that indicate to you? Because I was thinking at this time when we're trying to figure out how to move forward and design healthy spaces now, that they would be busy, but are they not busy yet?
Yeah, I would say it's mixed, and it depends on what their clients focus on, and what their kind of business focuses on. If they historically have been focused on kind of private clients and development of private investment spaces, I would say they're probably a little bit slower. Um, and like you said, they are the best indicator probably for us as far as where the industry is going for construction, just because obviously you have to have a design before you can construct. Um, so, we do see that they have some softness right now. Some of the design firms out there have had less billings, and there's some metrics that the um, construction industry tracks. If you look at the CFMA as one, and they track, where architect and engineer billings are, and you can see that they're down. And I think it really is dependent upon what space they kind of have a niche in.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of said this to you yesterday, but I feel like we're equally divided. Like half the people want to move in one direction, half the people want to move in a different direction, and that's kind of preventing us from choosing which way we're going to move forward in response to the pandemic. And it's kind of like a dead heat, and we're just haven't decided which way we're going to go yet. And I hope that something scientifically or medically will come out that tips us in one direction or the other. And then I feel like it would be just a groundswell of investment to move forward for everyone to adapt to whatever we determine is the decided upon way to have office space and HVAC and
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think we're divided. And what that does is it creates some uncertainty for people, and um, not necessarily it's always all bad, but the uncertainty creates, well, I don't know what I want to do or what's going to be the most successful in the future, so they won't put their dollars in that investment. The good news there, Holly, though, is that I think there is investment dollars available, and
yes.
I think there is still, the economic conditions haven't deteriorated to a sense that people couldn't invest. It's just there's that uncertainty that we got to get over for people to kind of make their decisions and then move forward with their design and their construction.
I think one of the positives out of this is that so the pandemic is a virus and that's not a positive, but something Wisconsin deals with every year is illnesses, the flu, viruses. And I feel like whatever solution they move towards to improve um, the healthiness of a work environment is going to be beneficial in cutting down downtime, sick leave. It's just going to be very beneficial in that respect for us. Maybe not so much for like a California or a Florida, but
Yeah, I do think it would help, and I think it can help us long term. So,
yeah, I agree.
yeah.
So we have the spending and investment issue, and I think it's a little on hold, like we talked about. Do you see any areas? You kind of mentioned that home investment in home remodeling is up, but do you see any specific industries that are doing well, or
Yeah.
are you
No,
seeing everyone kind of on hold?
no, I would say the things that are doing well are um, your e-commerce businesses that are tied to e-commerce.
Mm.
So, whether that's a data center because they need to retain the data, or a fulfillment center because they need, somewhere nearby where they can fulfill orders that are coming in online. Um, Certain manufacturing segments are still doing very well, as you see, the grocery chains have tended to do well right now. So the manufacturing environment that supports those are still doing pretty decently. And healthcare kind of comes and goes, I would say, a little bit because they want to do things and they want to adapt. But their challenge is, when they devote all their resources to handling a spike in the, hospitals or in the inpatient wards of their hospitals, then they don't have the people to kind of invest the time in the development for the future. So they kind of operate kind of a red light, green light. And sometimes they are doing really well where they plan for the future and then they kind of slow down. They slowed down in March, then they picked up over the summer, and they kind of slowed down here again in the last month or so just because of all the rise in cases.
Ooh, I didn't think about construction from the medical uh, industry standpoint, but I would think the pandemic has is going to have a huge impact on how they structure their facilities and handle healthcare in the future. Hmm.
Yeah, I would agree, Holly. I think what they're doing right now is they're trying to kind of make small changes that can adjust. An example would be, we put in some temporary entrances and temporary enclosures to close off spaces so that if somebody, is coming to the hospital to either get tested or to get some treatment, they're coming through a separate entrance and they're coming into a separate space,
Yeah.
which is a temporary solution, right? But eventually, healthcare is going to have some fallout to this, to where they're going to want some changes to their spaces and how they, you know, move people through the spaces, or how they section things off, so they can better respond to something, if something like this were to come up again, or this is prolonged and they need to figure out a way to um, adjust their physical space to adjust for it.
Right. Great. So, so we talk about the investment side, but I know that contractors have been impacted in multiple ways on the supply side of getting materials and the availability of materials. And I wanted to ask, I deal with a lot of small contractors, and there's a variety of issues they're facing: lumber shortages and lumber prices, and uh, obtaining materials, and they're adjusting how they handle what they store. What are you seeing as far as since the pandemic started, supply chain issues or supply issues?
Yeah, I would say the lumber pricing is spot on. I mean, I think that's partly driven by the rise in the residential construction. But some other areas that we've seen impacts to, I would say, things that technology touches. Um, if in today's construction, we have a lot of, I'll call it smart buildings, where things are tied into a Wi-Fi, so you can switch it off from a tablet, or switch it on or program it from a computer, and those types of things. Even the supply chain for them, if they were getting parts maybe from overseas, and those overseas manufacturers shut down for a month or two, those parts are delayed. So some of the construction has been challenging to get those parts and pieces that then get incorporated into the construction. So one area I would put is kind of technology and things that technology touches. Um, the other thing is just kind of one-offs, where maybe they're manufacturing or doing some of the manufacturing here in the States, but we've seen where, early in the pandemic, some states shut down, and it was a question whether that manufacturing plant was essential, based on the definition of the state, and they could continue. Or if they potentially had a few cases in their manufacturing plant, then they would shut down the plant for a couple of weeks. So we see one-off. Um, we saw it in a window supplier. We saw it in an air handler unit. We just kind of see it. We're challenged whenever it comes up on a one-by-one basis, because you typically have a minimum of a 10-day delay whenever, they shut down a plant for a few days. It just seems like there's always a 10-day delay on materials.
What are the, so we're seeing right now spikes around the world in different countries, um, getting shut down or doing lockdowns again. Are there any countries that you specifically watch for that are a big concern for the construction industry?
It really depends on the project. I mean, the big items that, materials, concrete, aggregate, drywall, all those types of big, supply type items. There's multiple suppliers, so normally we can find the supply chain to find it. Um, but it does become challenging. Um, the intricacies of whatever the designer has put in. Maybe it's a special tile. So an example might be, if we have a special tile that's a big part of a project, and it's coming from overseas. Let's say they are getting it from Italy. That we may be watching Italy to say, okay, what's going to happen to that manufacturer of that tile shipment? Is there a problem there? Um, and that would be someone we would watch kind of on a case by case basis. And our project teams really try to monitor, where is their material coming from and what their long lead may need to be.
Yeah. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
All right.
um, we were just talking before we started today about the differences between large and small contractors, and it's the sales tax in Wisconsin is complex. Well, it's complex in every state for contractors, but you guys face some of the same issues of complexity. And I'm just wondering, when I worked at DOR, part of my job was to come up with proposals to simplify sales tax. None of my stuff even made it past my boss because my simplification was too complex for legislators to understand. But that's how it is for the contractor issues. Everything's interconnected, which is why it's so complex.
Yep.
What would you like to see if you could simplify something? What would you like to see simplified?
Just to clarify, are you referring to sales tax or referring
Yes,
just to kind of the construction industry?
sales tax.
Um, I think the designation of an exempt entity, because some exempt entities in construction, I would say they just kind of push it to the contractor because of the contractor's responsibility to pay sales tax for the project. So they say, we don't really know whether we're sales tax or not. It's on you to figure it out. But they don't really um, help you kind of get through that process. So you either have to make the call of yes, they are, or no, there aren't, or dig into it a lot deeper. Where I think the state would know and be able to clarify who would be
So
exempt or not.
So you're referring to the building materials exemption and how it's
Sorry, yes.
limited, just to clarify, how it's which entities qualify, which exempt entities qualify, um, that the contractor can then claim the building materials exemption on their purchase of materials when it's an exempt entity. And, this is where I want to talk to John Mako about this when he's on, is that, what contractors asked for in that exemption was basically a flow through. If they're doing work for an exempt entity, period,
Mm-hmm.
that could purchase the materials exempt, that the contractor would not have to jump through hoops, have a separate purchasing entity, or make
Yes.
the exempt entity purchase the materials themselves, that you could purchase those materials exempt for that project, that are going into real property,
Yep.
and not have to go through any special circumstances. If your end customer could purchase it exempt, you should be able to purchase it exempt for that project. And that's what you guys pushed for. I say you guys, not you specifically, but that's what contractors pushed for. But when the legislators looked at implementing and approving that exemption into law, they looked at the financial impact. And that's where they did all these carve outs of which exempt entities qualify and then which projects qualify. So they created the facilities. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where this is what keeps happening in the sales tax law, is this, it just makes it so complex. But I agree with you.
Yeah. I would say once it became that complex, now the exempt entities don't even really know if they qualify. And if they're hard bidding a project, they'll just say, well, it's on you to figure it out. And so I think we would like to be able to, have that pass through if they could buy the materials tax exempt. But it just seems like we complicated the issue a little bit.
Yep, yep. I agree. I've given that feedback. It wasn't listened to, but we'll try with John Mako again. See, I know they're going to be looking for additional sales tax, but I think what I hear from contractors often, and you can tell me if you think differently, they'd be willing to pay a flat higher fee if it was consistent to remove the doubt and the complicated accounting and documentation.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, Holly. Just like when they changed the tax code, kind of the devil's in the details. So what does that really get us to when they pushed that out, I think is the question. And I don't fault them sometimes for making things
Mm-hmm.
complex, because when you get into this, it just gets complex as far as who really is exempt and who are we trying to make exempt and such. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, I worked when I got promoted at DOR and went to the Office of Technical Services, where we did more of working with the tax law and policy. I worked with Tom Areta, which is funny because he was my representative when I was growing up. He was from the Anago area. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember you. So every time I get frustrated with implementing more contractor tax law, I'd be like, explain to me what politicians are thinking. And he's like, Holly, it's complex. We have a lot to deal with, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, goodness. But
Yeah.
it's fun. It's
Yeah.
a different
And I
side of
know
things.
I'm sure, all size contractors are challenged with it, and I appreciate that I can give you a call and ask you to help me with it sometimes. So thanks for that.
That's why I came to this side. I was telling you earlier that the small contractors, when I would speak to them when I worked for DOR, would be like, I don't know how to do this. Just tell me what I need to do. And I'd be like, I can tell you the law, but I can't tell you how to do it. And I'm
Yeah.
so excited now to be on the other side and be like, okay, this is what you want to do. And we've had those conversations before. This is what you want to do, and this is how you do it, and this would be acceptable.
Yep.
But I'm not one of those frontline fighting the man kind of people. I I respect the legislators. I do, and I respect DOR as an administrative body, and I've worked with them, and I know that they're doing their best, and they work so hard to help taxpayers do the right thing. So I'm not out fighting the man. I'm here to help everyone do what they need to.
Yeah, and I think that our perspective on it would be we would like to follow exactly what we're supposed to follow. It just sometimes gets complex, and that's where we need some resources like yourself, or some clarifications from the Department of Revenue. And I know we've specifically asked questions whenever we have a project come up on the front end, and some of the folks at the Department of Revenue have helped us kind of clarify what does this mean exactly in this situation, and we'll ask on the front end just so that we have that um,
Yep.
clarification.
And that's not unique to JP Cullen. It's not based on your size. That's available to everyone. So I want everyone to understand that no matter what size contractor or business you are, that's available to everyone. So,
It is a very good resource too, Holly. And I would say, just for those that are listening or that will listen, um, just make sure you give yourself a few days to get a response, because obviously they're getting questions not just from you but from others, and so sometimes it does take a couple days for a response. So just make sure you plan ahead for your request.
and you know what the reason for that is? Because when I know from the inside, it'd be like, oh, I think I know what I want to respond to that. And then you discuss it with your colleagues, because nothing that goes out is not fully discussed and reviewed by the entire unit of sales tax specialists. Um, and so it takes time, and then we have these day-long meetings, basically half-day meetings, arguing. So when you think it's complicated for the administrators as well, trying to figure out how it's applied. So that is the reason. So yes, give yourself a couple days, if not a week, if possible. But all
Yep.
right. Thank you for coming on and talking with us today. I appreciate it. I know you have a busy schedule.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Holly. It's been good getting to know you and talk to you.
Awesome. So next week, I'm going to be speaking with Brad Boyks, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Builders Association, and we're going to be talking about the election results, not in a political sense, but what it's going to mean for policies and for contractors and businesses going forward. And I have two different multi-state tax guests coming up. We have Scott Peterson and Chad Paulson from Avalara talking about certified service providers. And then I also have Craig Johnson, Executive Director of the Streamlined Sales Tax Governing Board. He's coming back on. He's going to be on December 15th. And I specifically call out his date because he said he has an announcement for people to reveal on that date. Don't miss the interview. I alluded to it with Representative John Mako on November 24th. We're going to be talking about the future of sales tax law and moving towards simplification of the law. So don't miss that discussion. And to rewatch this episode or to view previous episodes of 10 on Tuesdays, just go to salesandincometax.com. Check out my 10 on Tuesdays channel. You're going to look for the 10 on Tuesdays logo and click on watch previous episodes underneath. And I will see you all next week. Thank you. Have a good week. Go out and vote.